out of the cannula and it is coming out quite easily, right? Now if you don't use this adapter, it becomes very difficult to pass the J-shaped wire through this cannula. Now if I try to pass the J-shape from here, it will just not go, and we will waste a lot of time to do it because it's very malleable here and you can't force it. It is very difficult to align this to the lumen inside. So that's the reason you need an adapter to straighten the J-shape, and once you use this, you are able to straighten the J-shape of the wire and then screw the wire onto the cannula so that both the lumens are aligned, and once they are done, the passage of the guide wire is very easily going into the 18 gauge cannula. So this is an 18 gauge cannula. The size of this wire is 0.35, which has been taken from the cardiology, and this passes very smoothly. Now you may say that you can use the other end to pass it if you don't have the adapter, but I would tend to disagree because this is quite a sharp metal guide wire, and if you see, if I puncture it and if it is trying to force, it's likely to produce a lot of damage to the posterior membrane because it doesn't bend. Right? It doesn't bend, and if it goes straight, it is likely to puncture the posterior tracheal membrane and create a lot of complications. So you have to use a J-shaped wire here. This is a J-shape of the wire, which has been procured from the cardiology, which they do for angiocaths. And that's what we are going to use to pass through the cannula. Now the other question may be that why can't we use the guide wire which is given by the triple lumen sets? The length of that guide wire is too small. It is this much, and we need at least double the size, double the length of the guide wire to what endotracheal tube we choose. Because once we thread in the tube or railroad the tube, the guide wire should always be, the end of the guide wire should always be held in the hand. It should always be available to be held in the hand. It should not be lost within the tube. So that's the reason this is about 140 centimeters long guide wire, and we'll always have the distal end available to us to be caught and made taut and then railroad the tube over that guide wire. So this is the guide wire which is going to go through the cannula once we perform a subcricoid puncture. Now the other thing which we need is, if you see this guide wire, it is very thin. And if I have to pass a tube over this guide wire, there is all the chances of the tube getting hitched somewhere in the glottis because the stability of the tube would not be there. Can we have an unsterile tube, please? Just to show them. So the problem with only the guide wire is that if you pass the guide wire and you try to railroad the tube through the guide wire alone, there is a lot of play between the guide wire and the tip, and there is very likelihood that the tip of the tube can get hitched anywhere at the vocal cords, create a lot of damage. So the tube is not stable and the guide wire is too thin to hold the tube in place or align the tube properly to the glottic aperture. So that's the reason we need something extra to make the tube more stable and the intubation less traumatic. And that's the reason what we have chosen here is a tube exchanger. Right? This is a tube exchanger, and if you see, this is about 53 centimeters long, 100 centimeters long. It is designed by Cook here. It has two lumens. One is a distal and the other is a proximal. How to identify them? If you see this one, it has got multiple pores, just like your epidural catheter which has 3 pores. This has about 5 pores here. So these are basically meant to be at the distal end so that you can insufflate oxygen. Or at times you can also perform jet ventilation through this if the patient loses the airway. Right? And the marking starts from here. The first marking is 5 centimeters and it is marked up till 35 centimeters. The total length is about, I think, about 70 centimeters. This should be 70 centimeters. The diameter is about 3.7 millimeters. That's the outer diameter. So that will be very well accommodated within the endotracheal tube. Now it has got two adapters. If you focus here, it has got two adapters. Now which one to choose? This is the one which can be attached to the anesthesia circuit. Now if you see, this is a 15 millimeter internal diameter, and you can actually put in the tube here and fix it and secure it like this, and you can attach the circuit to this to give oxygen insufflation if needed. Now this is the other adapter. Can anyone make a guess what this adapter is for?
Yes.
Are you able to see the picture clearly? Yeah. Can anyone make a guess what this adapter is for? We have been provided with two adapters. This is for for the circuit. What can be this adapter for?
I think for the answer given right now.
Yeah, what did they say?
The suction port?
No, it's not a suction. This is for jet ventilation. See, if you see here properly, it's got a leer lock system. So that's where you can actually attach the jet ventilator tubing and perform intermittent jet ventilation with this tube exchange. So you have two adapters, but fortunately the patient is awake, and we are going to perform an awake maneuver, and we will not require any of them because the tube has to go through this, the tube has to go through this, so we won't require any of those adapters at present. Now just focus at the patient. See how easy he's sleeping. That's amongst all the commotion which is around us. We have to make sure that the patient is at all times comfortable. Especially if the airway is not compromised, there is no contraindication for not giving adequate sedation. He sleeps at night, and he should be sleeping now as well. So these are the equipment which we have here with us. Now the tube which we have selected is going to be either 6.5 or 7. Now the most amount of discomfort which is experienced by the patient is when we introduce the tube into the nose. That's the time they have a lot of discomfort. If they have a stuffiness and pain, which is because of stretching and trauma which we can create. So what I'm going to do is, before we railroad the tube, I'm going to curl this tube up and put it in half boiling water, so that the tube is softened up, and when we introduce the tube, at least the softness of the tube would make it less traumatic than this hard tube which is very traumatic when we pass it into the nostrils. So this is the preliminaries which we wanted to tell you, and of course we have jelly. Now this jelly would be required at various times. You'll have to lubricate the external nostrils. So when we pass the tube, we might also have to lubricate the guide wire to pass it through the cannula. So we have this jelly with us, which we will use for lubrication at various points as and when we need it. So we will begin with a procedure. What we will, yeah.
The process is one of it. So is the dose been regulated only with xylomethylene, or have you used the local anesthetic pack as well?
We have used both of them. Both of them have been used. Initially, actually, what we did was we gave some xylomethylene so that it has a vasoconstrictor effect. Following that, we had 10% lignocaine. So after about 5 minutes, I just sprayed with 5% lignocaine, about 2 puffs on each nostrils. Once those 2 cotton pads were inside, another 2 cotton pads were taken, which were soaked in 2% lignocaine jelly, and they were just put onto the outside of the external layers. That's it. So these are the agents which we have used. We don't want xylomethylene outside the nose. It has to go inside, because that is where the trauma is going to occur. So the first 2 nasal packs which were given contained xylomethylene. Then came the one with lignocaine 10%, and the outer one was with the jelly, which we have just removed it out, and we will have to reapply the jelly again before we introduce the endotracheal tube to that. Can we proceed?
Do you advise any nasal laryngoscope for
we have a fiber optic laryngoscope here, and we did that. In fact, I just did a fiber optic nasolaryngoscopy because it is there, and we could easily see the glottis without any problem. But what we are going to use the fiber optic here, I'm not saying we'll use it, but we will try to use the fiber optic to show you the dynamics of the tube and the tube exchanger at the glottic level. So from one nostril I'm going to pass the fiber optic for the audience to see what is happening to the distal end of the tube, or where the tube exchanger is going to hitch against the anterior wall of the trachea. But that is again depending upon how much the patient cooperation is there, because eventually they will be moving their, they will be swallowing. So when they swallow too much, the view just disappears. But let's see, if we give him good anesthesia, we might just be able to see the dynamics of the tube exchanger going inside, hitching at the anterior tracheal wall, and how the tube itself goes inside the glottis before we release the guide wire and take out the tube exchanger. So those dynamics we will try to show you through the fiber optic, pass through the other nostril. I will try that. I'm not very sure how far we can see the view, but we'll definitely try that. That's why the fiber optic has been kept very detailed.
Just asking you only one last question. Any questions on preparation of the patient or examination of the airway? Is there one question for this?
Yeah.
So for pre-medication you use morphine.
Yes, sir.
Any other, what is the rationale and any other drug alternative drugs, because morphine is sometimes difficult to purchase.
No, you can use any narcotic. I just wanted to give him a narcotic pre-medication along with a diazepam pre-medication. It's going to be an invasive procedure. At times it is painful when we put the tube, when we do the subcricoid puncture, all that is quite discomforting to the patient. So that's the reason a morphine pre-medication has been added. And moreover, it does complement the sedative and anxiolytic pre-medication given by a benzodiazepine.
I don't think there is any strict thing that morphine has to be given. Any form of opioid taking is available in the practice.
Yeah, anything can be given. This routinely you give it in the ward. So ward IM injection, it will give you a good effect for almost 3 hours at least. Basal analgesic levels and drowsiness would be maintained. And if you want to top up with small doses, it's good. Rather than giving a potent one at this time and then having a saturation which will drop to 90 suddenly, and then you will not know what to do with it. So good pre-medication would be give an IM injection so that the blood levels are satisfactory. You don't encounter too much of desaturation with the patient going drowsy and snoring too much suddenly, and then you have to abandon oxygenate in between. So I would prefer to give an IM narcotic and then supplement gradually as and when needed with IV narcotics. That's what I would choose.
But you can prepare also, you can use also IV narcotics.
You can use. There's no problem in using. Yeah, you can definitely use. But no,
give steroids as a pre-medicament in this case?
No, I haven't given that. I haven't given any steroids as such, but there is no contraindication not to use it. If you want to give a single dose of dexamethasone, that has been definitely proven to be of a great beneficial effect. It is an anti-emetic, it is an anti-inflammatory. So those effects can actually be utilized. There is no contraindication to its use.
Any gastric prophylaxis do you follow, or
which prophylaxis?
Gastric prophylaxis in
no. Yeah, of course you can give it. There is no problem. This patient is going to be awake, and regularly famotidine or any sort of antacid can be given to the patients. That's not a problem at all. Okay, now what we are going to do is, we are going to position the patient for the subcricoid puncture. Are there any more questions? Shall we proceed?
No, I think we can proceed with the...
Okay. Now what we need to tell you here is that just to tell you a little bit about how we need to do a subcricoid puncture. See, the anterior part of the higher part of the trachea above the cricoid cartilage is quite fixed. It's quite fixed because you have two cartilages here, hyoid, cricoid, and three cartilages, hyoid, thyroid, and cricoid. So this part of the trachea is quite wide and fixed. But as soon as you come below cricoid, the trachea dips down, right? It dips down and then you are not able to locate it well, and that part of the trachea is fairly mobile and fairly soft. So now to perform a subcricoid puncture, you will have to have or bring the trachea as much as possible forward. So that can be attained by giving a shoulder bag. So we will just put a shoulder bag under the